Before we begin this story, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications, because here you'll find intense, mysterious stories full of twists and turns that will keep you hooked until the very end. And tell me in the comments, where are you watching from? I love knowing where in the world you're following from. It makes each story even more special. The cold wind cut through the corridors of the old mansion like a warning, whispering stories of forgotten times. The mansion, built in the 19th century, stood out for its colossal size and isolation. Surrounded by a dense forest, no neighborhood light reached its windows. The inhabitants of the neighboring town spoke little of the place, and when they did, it was in tones of fear and reverence. "The exiled princess," they murmured, as if pronouncing the name awakened something dark. Inside the mansion, each room exuded an aura of neglect and decadent elegance. The faded tapestries concealed shadows that seemed to move on their own, and the parquet floor creaked under invisible footsteps. Among the furniture draped in sheets, a constant feeling that someone was always watching filled the air. The protagonist, Ethan Caldwell Ethan, a young investigative journalist, arrived in town driven by rumors and incomplete stories about the mansion. Determined to write a career-changing story, he carried only a backpack, his camera, and a notebook where he jotted down every strange detail he encountered. Ethan wasn't superstitious, but each step inside the mansion increased a tension he couldn't explain. Journalism always demanded courage, but nothing had prepared him for what he felt there. In contrast, the antagonist of the story was no ordinary person. The mansion seemed alive, carrying the memory of Isabella von Hohenberg, Isabella, the exiled princess who had arrived from Europe after a series of family scandals. The exile was motivated by accusations that were never proven, but which left permanent marks on the family's history. Isabella, known for her enigmatic beauty and unpredictable behavior, mysteriously disappeared in the 1920s, leaving behind a legacy of legends that no one dared to challenge. Her presence, or the feeling of it, seemed to permeate every brick of the building, as if her own mansion had become an extension of her personality. Upon entering, Ethan noticed the contrast between luxury and neglect. Crystal chandeliers, covered in thick dust, still hung from the ceiling. Family portraits stared with stern gazes, their worn frames seeming to freeze expressions in a suspended time. He felt a chill that wasn't just caused by the cold. There was something more, something unseen but palpable. The feeling that each door he opened carried with it an untold story increased his anxiety and at the same time, his determination. As he walked through the corridors, Ethan found signs of past life, yellowed letters scattered between the floorboards, furniture moved as if someone had just left, footsteps in the dust. Each detail added layers to the silent narrative of the mansion. He noted every movement, every sensation, trying to separate reality from superstition. It was clear that the mansion hid something. But what? And why could no one stay there overnight? Ethan's first night in the mansion brought a series of unsettling events. The sound of the wind seemed to carry whispers, doors slammed shut on their own, and shadows moved aimlessly. Ethan felt watched, but each time he turned to confront the presence, there was nothing but emptiness. He began to notice patterns. Events occurred at specific times, and certain rooms were more active than others. A portrait of Isabella, placed in the main hall, seemed to watch him intently, its painted eyes appearing to follow his every move. However, Ethan remained focused. He knew that the truth rarely revealed itself in a simple way. Every trace of the exiled princess, every sign of abandonment or mysterious care became a clue. Among personal belongings, he found old diaries containing fragments of Isabella's thoughts, suggesting a life of secrets, fear, and manipulation. The enigma of the princess's disappearance was beginning to take shape in a way more complex than any urban legend could describe. The contrast between Ethan and the mansion established the core of the conflict: rationality versus mystery, science versus superstition, presence versus absence. Each step the journalist took in his search for the truth provoked subtle responses from the environment, as if the mansion itself were testing his courage. The tension increased with each corridor traversed, and the line between reality and imagination began to blur. In this opening scene, the story builds a palpable sense of danger and curiosity. The reader is invited to walk through the dark corridors, feel the chill of absence and presence simultaneously, and accompany Ethan in his search for answers that may not be human, but carry an unparalleled historical and emotional weight. The central mystery is set. Isabella von Hohenberg has disappeared, but her influence persists, and discovering the truth will require Ethan to confront more than shadows and ruins. He will have to face the past and what the mansion holds within its silent walls. The exiled princess's mansion was not just an abandoned building. It was a reliquary of stories intertwined with the past of the United States. Located in the small town of Hawthorne in New England, the building carried the weight of an era of great contrasts. Imported European luxury clashed with the austerity of local architecture, creating a unique atmosphere laden with symbolism. The stained glass windows reflected the moonlight in an unreal way, and the long, narrow corridors conveyed a sense of confinement and petrified memory. Ethan began to explore the mansion's rooms in more detail, noticing how each object told a story. An old piano, covered in dust, still retained some functional keys, and each note that echoed seemed to awaken echoes of the past. On the walls, portraits of Isabella's European ancestors watched with hard, judgmental gazes, while furniture she had commissioned revealed her refined taste, and at the same time, the melancholy of someone who felt displaced in a foreign land. During his investigations, Ethan met Margaret Hensley. Margaret, the local history curator who kept records of the mansion, was a middle-aged woman, intelligent, and with a keen eye that seemed to see through anyone's facade. Margaret had studied the von Hohenberg family for decades and had become a sort of guardian of the princess's memories. Her stories were always punctuated by dramatic pauses and whispers, as if revealing the deeper details was too risky. For Ethan, Margaret became an indispensable ally, providing old documents, photographs, and letters that added layers to the mystery. The story of Isabella, the exiled princess, was marked by a turbulent past. Born in Austria, she was sent to the United States after a series of scandals involving the European royal family. The promise of freedom and anonymity soon became a burden. Adapting to a new country, different customs, and distance from her lineage began to erode her emotional sanity. Old documents found by Ethan suggested that Isabella kept a secret diary, recording strange encounters and unexpected visits that fueled local legends of apparitions. Other secondary characters began to gain importance. Thomas Reed, the caretaker of the mansion, was a reserved man with a silent loyalty to Isabella's memory. He knew every corridor, every room, every secret of the building. Despite his few and direct words, his actions revealed a man tormented by events he could barely explain. His presence was crucial for Ethan to understand the strange patterns within the mansion: doors that closed on their own, objects that disappeared and reappeared, and the constant feeling that someone was being watched. The town of Hawthorne itself added a cultural and historical backdrop to the narrative. Old New England traditions, such as autumn fairs, antique markets, and patriotic celebrations, contrasted with the mansion's somber atmosphere. The entire town seemed to live under a veil of respect and fear for the place. Children ran through alleys and avoided properties. Adults whispered stories of sightings and strange disappearances. This combination of local culture and European legend reinforced the mystery surrounding Isabella and the mansion, making Ethan's investigation richer and more complex. As Ethan delved into the letters and diaries, subtle details of Isabella's personality and motivations emerged. She was not merely a victim of exile, but a strategic, observant woman who knew how to manipulate situations to her advantage. Even when trapped in a hostile environment, her complex character contrasted with Ethan's determination, who saw journalism as a tool for justice and revealing the truth. This interplay between rationality and mystery, past and present, created constant tension, keeping the reader attentive to each discovery. Furthermore, the veiled antagonism of the mansion, as if it possessed a will of its own, intensified the atmosphere. Every object, every corridor, and every shadow seemed to reflect the princess's story, making the environment an integral part of the narrative. Ethan understood that to unravel the mystery, he would need to interpret not only documents and accounts, but also the subtle signs of the physical space, the creaking of the floorboards, the position of the furniture, and Thomas Reed's strange behavior. This phase of the story deepens the reader's emotional connection to the world and its inhabitants, establishing clear motivations and enriching the understanding of the conflicts that will arise. The mystery ceases to be solely about Isabella's disappearance, becoming also about how the past shapes the present and how the mansion, almost a character in itself, influences the decisions, fears, and hopes of those who dare to cross its corridors. With each passing day in the mansion, Ethan felt the mystery surrounding Isabella deepen. What had once seemed to be just a collection of rumors and old accounts was now transforming into a labyrinth of contradictory clues and unsettling signs. The atmosphere, once merely somber, had become hostile, as if the mansion were aware of the young journalist's presence. Doors locked themselves, lights flickered inexplicably, and the creaking of the floorboards seemed to mimic footsteps that belonged to no one. Every attempt to rationalize the events clashed with the reality that something deeper, perhaps supernatural, perhaps psychological, was at play. The first major obstacle arose when Ethan discovered a secret compartment in Isabella's office. Inside, there was a collection of coded letters, addressed to people whose identities had been lost to time. Trying to decipher them, he realized that some contained veiled threats, others revealed mysterious nighttime meetings that Isabella kept secret. It was evident that the princess had enemies, but also hidden allies. This new element intensified the conflict. The mansion was not only a physical space of mystery, but a record of ancient intrigues, secrets, and betrayals. Thomas Reed, the caretaker, became more reserved. His loyalty to Isabella seemed to conflict with his need to protect Ethan from events he himself didn't fully understand. On several occasions, Thomas tried to dissuade the young man from investigating certain rooms, implying that some doors should remain closed. Ethan, however, felt that each warning increased his curiosity. The clash between the protagonist's determination and the caretaker's caution intensified, generating narrative tension and new layers to the main conflict. Meanwhile, Margaret Hensley brought disturbing information. Historical documents suggested that Isabella hadn't completely disappeared, but had manipulated her own escape to protect valuable secrets from her family and political allies. This revelation completely changed the perspective of the investigation. Ethan wasn't just seeking answers about an old disappearance. He was trying to understand a web of manipulations that stretched back decades. The mansion, like a silent witness, seemed to react to this investigation. Amplifying warning signs, objects moved on their own. Once tranquil corridors seemed endless, and echoes of footsteps emerged from empty spaces. Ethan's internal conflict also deepened. He had to confront doubts about his own perception of reality. Was it possible that his environment was influencing his mind? Or did Isabella's story hide truths so disturbing that ordinary rationality wasn't enough to comprehend them? Each clue challenged his sense of certainty and demanded quick, often risky decisions that could cost him more than just his journalistic career. The mansion's antagonism became more evident through unexpected events. One night, Ethan was surprised by an incident that mixed mystery and physical danger. Heavy objects fell from shelves for no apparent reason, blocking his exit from the main hall. Upon escaping, he noticed signs suggesting that someone, perhaps Isabella or someone connected to her, was leaving coded messages among the furniture, like warnings disguised as accidents. This ambiguity heightened the suspense, making each step inside the mansion a test of courage. Furthermore, interpersonal conflicts arose that further complicated the investigation. Margaret, although trustworthy, had her own motivations: to preserve Isabella's memory while simultaneously protecting the city's historical reputation. This placed Ethan in situations of ethical conflict. To what extent could he expose secrets that could tarnish the princess's image or bring consequences for living descendants of the family? Each choice affected not only his investigation, but also his relationship with Margaret and Thomas, creating human tensions that intertwined with the supernatural or psychological mystery of the mansion. The signs that the mansion was reacting to Ethan's progress intensified. On certain nights, he noticed objects strategically changing places, letters disappearing and reappearing in different locations, and shadows seeming to guide or block his path. Each obstacle was not only physical, but symbolic. The mansion tested Ethan's ability to interpret clues, to persevere in the face of fear, and to confront secrets that could alter history as he knew it. The main conflict, therefore, was not just about discovering Isabella's whereabouts or deciphering her secrets. It was the struggle between past and present, between reality and perception, between courage and caution. Each secondary character added layers. Margaret represented the balance between preservation and revelation. Thomas, the weight of loyalty and fear, and the mansion itself became an antagonist, challenging Ethan in unpredictable ways. At the close of this development, the tension reached a high point. Ethan was increasingly immersed in the princess's story, surrounded by obstacles that combined physical, psychological, and moral danger. The reader is led to feel the weight of each discovery, the uncertainty of each step, and the complexity of the characters, preparing the ground for the subplots and complexities that will emerge in the next stage of the narrative. As Ethan delved deeper into the secrets of the mansion, other stories began to emerge, each intertwined with the central mystery. The first of these involved Elena Winters. Elena, a local historian and distant descendant of the von Hohenberg family, possessed a personal interest in the mansion that went beyond mere historical study. Old letters suggested she might be entitled to part of the princess's inheritance. However, her presence wasn't solely motivated by ambition. She brought with her oral accounts from the family that offered clues about Isabella, including nocturnal encounters and strange disappearances of objects that no one could explain. The relationship between Ethan and Elena immediately became complex. Collaboration mixed with distrust, partnership fraught with hidden agendas. Another subplot emerged with Isabella's diary, which Ethan finally began to decipher more deeply. Each entry revealed personal secrets, including suspicious friendships, veiled threats, and possible betrayals within the princess's inner circle. One passage suggested that Isabella suspected a member of the local community who might still be alive or have family members keeping old secrets. This created an additional layer of suspense. The conflict wasn't just with the mansion or the disappearance, but also with a network of people who might have conflicting interests, some of whom might be willing to protect the secret at any cost. While Ethan grappled with these dilemmas, Thomas Reed began to show signs of unease. He was caught speaking in hushed tones with Elena, raising suspicions about alliances within the mansion. Ethan, though concerned about Thomas's loyalty, realized that the caretaker was trying to protect secrets that could be dangerous if revealed. The tension increased as each character's intentions became ambiguous, challenging the protagonist to discern who might be an ally and who represented a hidden threat. Time pressure was subtly introduced. Letters indicated that certain documents belonging to the princess would soon be auctioned, potentially exposing sensitive information to unscrupulous collectors or researchers. Ethan faced an invisible deadline, heightening the urgency of his decisions and encouraging risky actions. The mansion seemed to reflect this tension. Shadows appeared denser, noises grew louder, and the atmosphere compelled Ethan to continue his relentless investigation. Each corridor became a field of observation where every detail could be crucial, and every mistake could cost him important discoveries. The conflict between the characters gained emotional depth when Ethan discovered that Margaret Hensley had hidden certain documents for decades, fearing that their exposure would cause scandals in the city. This revelation shook Ethan's confidence, but also created an opportunity for dialogue. He would need to persuade Margaret to cooperate without breaking the ethics she upheld. The interaction between these secondary characters reinforced the narrative complexity, showing that each decision had moral and emotional consequences. Meanwhile, seemingly minor events began to connect the subplots to the central conflict. Objects moved around the mansion, whispers in the distance, and coded signs on the walls indicated that someone or something was monitoring Ethan's every move. These manifestations heightened the feeling that Isabella, even in her physical absence, had left mechanisms in place to protect her secrets. Each subplot, from Elena to Thomas and Margaret, was linked to these signs, forming a complex web of intentions, fears, and manipulation of the past over the present. The unfolding of the subplots also brought psychological tension. Ethan began to question his own perception of reality. The clues left by the princess, often ambiguous and manipulative, led him to confront not only external mysteries, but also internal fears and ethical judgments. This created a mirror effect, reflecting the impact of the past on the present in a way that kept the narrative rich and unpredictable. The subplots, therefore, not only deepened the secondary characters, but also created continuous narrative pressure. Each interaction carried the potential for discovery, betrayal, or revelation. The story of the exiled princess became a multifaceted puzzle, where each seemingly isolated piece contributed to the larger mystery and to Ethan's arc as the protagonist. The narrative pace accelerated, preparing the ground for the next major turning point, where these subplots would converge dramatically and unexpectedly. In the quietest night yet, Ethan explored the upper floor of the mansion, illuminating each corridor with his flashlight. The air was heavy, thick with dampness and old dust. Each step echoed, and the creaking of the floorboards seemed to match his own heartbeat. He didn't yet know that he was about to encounter something that would transform the entire investigation. While examining one of the locked doors that Thomas had always avoided mentioning, Ethan noticed an old key hidden in a crack in the floor. Without hesitation, he inserted it into the lock. The click resonated like a stroke of fate. Upon opening it, he found a secret little room, its walls covered with old photographs of Isabella and unknown people. In the center, a desk with diaries that had never been recorded in public archives. The discovery immediately brought about a mixture of excitement and apprehension. Each page contained details that not only explained the princess's past, but also suggested that something bigger and more dangerous was afoot. Among the diaries, one letter caught Ethan's attention. It was addressed to someone named L. The message described clandestine meetings, plans to manipulate the perception of the local community, and strategies to hide secrets that could ruin the reputations of powerful families. Even more shocking, there was a direct mention of the mansion as a guardian of the secrets, almost as if the building itself had consciousness and a will of its own. Ethan felt a chill. The mansion was not merely a setting or witness, but an active participant in preserving Isabella's mysteries. At that very moment, Thomas Reed appeared in the hallway, silent as always. His expression was one of restrained fear. "You shouldn't be here," he said, his voice low, almost a whisper. The tension between the two was palpable. Ethan needed to continue, but he felt the first real threat of the narrative materializing in the form of human resistance. Thomas revealed that the mansion had been the scene of dark events, protecting secrets that many still wished to keep hidden, including members of the town itself. He warned that Ethan's curiosity could put everyone in danger, and that certain information could trigger unpredictable reactions. While trying to process the gravity of the situation, Ethan received an unexpected call from Eleanor. Her voice was tense, almost hysterical. "Ethan, you need to come to the library now. There's someone there you need to see." Confused, he rushed through the corridors, feeling every shadow as a threat. Upon arriving, he found Margaret Hensley, who awaited him with a grave expression. Beside her, an unexpected figure appeared, an elderly man who introduced himself as a direct descendant of one of Isabella's closest families. He brought documents that revealed a disturbing truth. Isabella had not only manipulated her disappearance, but also carefully planned the preservation of her legacy and the secrets of the mansion, ensuring that certain truths would only be discovered by someone capable of interpreting subtle signs. This revelation completely changed Ethan's perspective. The investigation was no longer just about deciphering the disappearance or uncovering the secrets of the mansion. Now he understood that he was dealing with a web of historical intentions and manipulations, which would require intelligence, courage, and keen interpretation of symbols and patterns left by Isabella. Every obstacle, every shadow, and every object moved was not random. They were signs strategically left to test, guide, and challenge anyone who dared to seek the truth. The turning point also brought an emotional upheaval. Ethan realized that his very presence in the mansion could trigger events that would jeopardize not only his life, but also the safety of Thomas, Elena, and Margaret. The internal conflict intensified. How far should he go? The desire to reveal the truth now mingled with the real fear of unpredictable consequences, and the line between ally and enemy became increasingly blurred. As dawn approached, Ethan faced a crucial choice: follow clues that could completely reveal Isabella's past, or retreat, preserving the secrets that the mansion seemed to demand remain hidden. Every action would have ramifications, not only for him, but for everyone involved. The narrative, until then linear in its development, now multiplied in possibilities, increasing the tension, suspense, and unpredictability. This turning point establishes the true driving force of the plot. Ethan's investigation ceases to be a simple account of an exiled princess and transforms into a battle of wits, courage, and interpretation of historical and psychological clues. The mansion, Isabella, the secondary characters, and the town of Hawthorne itself become pieces in a complex game of discovery, mystery, and high-stakes decisions. After the discovery of the secret room and Isabella's diaries, the mansion seemed more alive than ever. Every corridor, every shadow, and every object out of place now carried a deeper meaning. Ethan felt the weight of responsibility. What he had discovered could forever change the city's perception of the exiled princess and the secrets she had left behind. The immediate consequences were reflected in the relationships between the characters. Thomas Reed, the caretaker, began to act more cautiously, almost as if trying to protect Ethan from unseen forces. He started accompanying him on every exploration, but his behavior indicated tension. Each warning of "don't touch that" or "don't go there" carried more weight, demonstrating that the caretaker knew more about the dangers than he let on. His loyalty, previously silent, transformed into active vigilance, creating a dynamic of veiled conflict and intense protection. Margaret Hensley, on the other hand, reacted with a mixture of relief and concern. She knew the truth about Isabella was about to emerge, but feared the impact it would have on the town and on families still alive. Her stance alternated between full collaboration with Ethan and withholding certain information, revealing the complexity of her motivation, preserving the princess's memory without exposing dangerous secrets. This tension added an important emotional layer to the narrative, showing that even allies can have conflicting agendas. Elena Winters brought new reactions to the group. Upon realizing that Ethan had access to Isabella's most intimate diaries, her curiosity and ambition mingled with fear and fascination. She began to question the limits of the investigation, wondering if the complete exposure of these secrets was ethical or safe. Her presence reinforced the moral complexity of the plot. The truth could be liberating, but also destructive. The interaction between Ethan and Elena generated short, subtext-laden dialogues, full of tension, suspicion, and collaboration, making each decision a challenge. The mansion itself seemed to respond to Ethan's actions. Objects that had previously moved almost randomly began to create patterns. Doors that locked behind him, corridors that seemed to intentionally lengthen, and shadows that suggested guidance or warning. The perception that the environment was reacting consciously intensified the suspense, making each of the protagonist's steps fraught with expectation and danger. The mansion became an active character, whose influence on events became inevitable. The psychological pressure on Ethan intensified. Each discovery made in the princess's diaries demanded immediate decisions. Revealing a secret could save or destroy reputations, while backing down meant leaving mysteries unsolved. The narrative tension grew, combining elements of physical danger, psychological manipulation, and ethical dilemmas. Ethan needed to balance his journalistic curiosity with the real risk of provoking unexpected reactions from people or events still unknown. The consequences were also reflected in the narrative's pacing. Unexpected obstacles arose as Ethan attempted to explore new rooms and decipher Isabella's riddles. Objects disappeared or reappeared in different places, coded messages gained meaning, and the temporal urgency intensified. Some documents were about to be auctioned or exposed, which could put crucial information in the wrong hands. Each step required quick analysis, courage, and intuition, maintaining constant tension. Furthermore, the revelation of the turning point brought additional internal and emotional conflicts. Ethan began to question not only his own perceptions, but also the motivations of Thomas, Elena, and Margaret. The balance between trust and suspicion became crucial. Each interaction could open paths to discoveries or create new obstacles. These character reactions enriched the narrative, showing that the conflict was not only external, but also internal and relational. By the end of this period, the story had transformed from a linear investigation into a complex web of interconnected consequences. The discoveries about Isabella, combined with the reaction of the mansion and the interactions between the characters, created fertile ground for Ethan's growth and the intensification of the central conflict. The narrative remained unpredictable, with each action generating immediate and lasting effects, establishing the basis for the next stage of the story, overcoming and growth. After the revelation of the secret room and the coded letters, Ethan realized that investigating the exiled princess's mansion would require more than courage. It would demand strategic intelligence and emotional resilience. The turning point had placed each character before critical decisions, and the mansion continued to feel alive, almost like a conscious enigma testing Ethan's resolve. The first challenge came in the form of a series of even more complex clues, encrypted symbols on the walls, hidden patterns in antique furniture, and subtle notes in Isabella's diaries. Interpreting these messages required not only patience, but also creativity and the ability to connect seemingly unrelated elements. Ethan began to develop his own method of decoding, combining logic and intuition, which demonstrated his intellectual and adaptive growth. He went from a cautious observer to an active interpreter of the princess's mystery. The emotional pressure also increased. Thomas Reed, formerly a quiet caretaker, revealed an old secret. He had witnessed strange phenomena that caused physical injuries to previous visitors, and he feared that Ethan might suffer the same fate. Confronting Thomas and understanding the depth of his fears required Ethan to develop empathy and emotional maturity. He needed to balance his determination to proceed with consideration for the safety of those around him, demonstrating growth in his leadership and decision-making skills. Margaret Hensley brought another challenge, this time an ethical one. Certain documents revealing the princess's secrets could destroy the reputation of influential families if they became public. Ethan had to decide to what extent the pursuit of truth justified the risk of consequences for others. This dilemma forced him to mature, reflecting on responsibility, justice, and the impact of his actions without relying on lengthy dialogues. His decisions began to reflect not only courage, but also prudence and moral sensitivity. Elena Winters also contributed to Ethan's growth. Initially motivated by personal ambition, she began to recognize the importance of historical preservation and respect for the secrets left by Isabella. Together, they developed a cooperative dynamic based on trust and strategy. The relationship between Ethan and Elena evolved, showing that the protagonist's personal growth was directly linked to his ability to build strong alliances, handle interpersonal conflicts, and navigate complex interests without losing focus on the main objective. Meanwhile, the mansion continued to present physical and psychological obstacles. Ethan faced doors that closed unexpectedly, objects that moved mysteriously, and corridors that seemed to alter their own geometry. Each challenge demanded speed, planning, and courage, causing him to hone his practical survival skills within the hostile environment. He learned to trust his senses, observe patterns, and anticipate movements in his surroundings, demonstrating a clear evolution in perception and adaptability. A crucial turning point occurred when Ethan found a secret passage connecting Isabella's room to hidden areas of the mansion, revealing previously undocumented corridors. This discovery required him to confront his fear of the unknown and overcome insecurities that arose whenever he encountered the unexpected. His ability to move forward, despite physical and psychological fear, demonstrated his transformation. From someone motivated solely by curiosity, he became a protagonist, capable of acting with strategy, courage, and discernment. Beyond the physical and intellectual challenges, Ethan began to grapple with issues of perceiving reality. The mansion tested his emotional sanity, introducing ambiguous signs and coded messages that could confuse any investigator. To grow, he needed to learn to trust his own intuition, balancing reason and sensitivity to that which could not be simply explained. This balance marked an essential stage in his arc. Ethan ceased to be merely an observer of the mystery and became an active agent, capable of interpreting and interacting with the environment effectively. The subplots involving Thomas, Margaret, and Elena intertwined with Ethan's growth. He understood that each character had their own fears, motivations, and limitations, and that respecting those limits was fundamental to advancing the investigation. This realization broadened his emotional maturity, strengthening his ability to lead, negotiate, and make strategic choices in high-pressure situations. Ethan's evolution wasn't just internal, it was directly reflected in how he interacted with others and responded to the challenges of the mansion. By the end of this phase, Ethan had transformed significantly. The protagonist who arrived at the mansion curious and cautious had become a skilled researcher, emotionally resilient, a strategist, and capable of facing the unknown without hesitation. His journey of growth prepared the ground for the next stage of the narrative, the preparation for the climax, where all the acquired skills, all the decisions and alliances would be tested in situations of maximum tension and unpredictability. The exiled princess's mansion had become a labyrinth of discoveries and tensions, and now Ethan felt that every step was crucial. The subplots that had previously unfolded in parallel began to converge, creating a complex network of connections between past and present, allies and potential threats. The realization that every move had immediate consequences accelerated the narrative's pace, preparing the ground for the final confrontation. Thomas Reed intensified his role as guardian of the mansion. He began accompanying Ethan on all explorations, offering precise information about secret corridors, hidden passages, and subtle patterns in the furniture. His loyalty became a point of security, but also a source of tension. Each misstep could trigger unpredictable events. The dynamic between protector and investigator reinforced the sense of urgency, and each interaction carried layers of suspicion and collaboration. Margaret Hensley, aware that certain documents and diaries could be exposed, began helping Ethan catalogue essential information. Together, their discoveries indicated that the mansion was not merely a witness to the past, but an intentional mechanism of protection and manipulation. Isabella had left strategic clues to guide or confuse anyone seeking the truth. This revelation heightened the tension. Ethan now needed to correctly interpret each clue, at the risk of serious error. The narrative gained momentum as each discovery became a potential trigger for the climax's maximum tension. Elena Winters, in turn, revealed that some documents were still in the possession of collectors or distant relatives. The need to recover or understand these external pieces created an additional sense of urgency. Ethan realized that he couldn't just explore the mansion. He needed to act strategically outside of it, integrating the search for external clues into the central investigation. This expansion of the narrative intensified the suspense and created multiple lines of tension that converged on the same point. Meanwhile, inexplicable signs within the mansion intensified. Objects moved with precision, doors locked at strategic moments, and shadows seemed to guide or block paths. Ethan understood that Isabella had designed the mansion as a final test. Courage alone wasn't enough. It was necessary to interpret patterns, anticipate traps, and maintain emotional clarity in the face of unexpected situations. Each physical and psychological obstacle heightened the reader's anticipation, naturally and engagingly preparing for the climax. Time pressure also reached its peak. Documents about to be auctioned or discovered by third parties created an invisible limit to Ethan's actions. The narrative accelerated, and every choice demanded speed without losing precision. The tension was palpable. Failure meant losing crucial clues or revealing secrets prematurely, while advancing safely required skill, strategy, and courage. Interpersonal conflicts intensified, solidifying the subplots. Thomas and Elena revealed unexpected sides of their personalities. Fear, ambition, and loyalty intertwined in short dialogues laden with subtext. Margaret maintained a firm stance, reminding Ethan that not all secrets should be carelessly exposed. The convergence of these characters created a network of complex interactions, where each decision directly impacted the investigation, increasing the unpredictability of the climax. Finally, Ethan began to notice patterns that indicated one last great revelation from the princess. Isabella had prepared a mechanism so that her story, her truth, and her secrets would emerge in a controlled manner, depending on the skill and perseverance of those who dared to seek answers. This understanding transformed each previous action into learning, consolidating the protagonist's growth and creating anticipation for the moment when all narrative threads, past, present, mansion, and characters, would converge. At this stage, the narrative reaches a point where tension, suspense, and build-up converge. Ethan is ready, emotionally mature, strategically skilled, and aware of the moral and historical complexities of the investigation. Every subplot has been aligned to converge, every obstacle has been partially overcome, and every secondary character has a defined role, ensuring that the climax is impactful, coherent, and unpredictable. The clock struck the early hours of the morning, and Ethan knew this was the decisive moment. Each step he took through the mansion's corridors echoed like a warning drum. The atmosphere, until then heavy with mystery, seemed to throb with an almost conscious energy, as if Isabella herself were observing and testing every decision. The walls, covered with portraits and old documents, reflected not only the princess's history, but also the dilemmas of all who dared to infringe upon her legacy. Ethan entered the great hall, where he had previously discovered coded symbols that now made sense. Every detail of the environment seemed designed to lead him to an inevitable conclusion. Thomas Reed remained nearby, vigilant, while Elena and Margaret monitored from strategic points, awaiting signs that might indicate traps or critical revelations. The moment demanded maximum attention. Any mistake could be irreversible. The tension intensified when Ethan found Isabella's last diary hidden inside a secret compartment in the fireplace. Upon opening it, he discovered messages that not only clarified the princess's disappearance, but also revealed secrets about hidden allies and enemies within the town of Hawthorne. Isabella had manipulated events and people so subtly that many believed in coincidences. Now everything was exposed. Every shadow, every corridor, and every object moved throughout the mansion had a purpose, guiding the investigator to the ultimate truth. At that moment, an unexpected twist occurred. Elena revealed that some of the clues led her to her own interpretation of the princess's legacy, potentially changing the course of the investigation. She tried to convince Ethan to follow an alternative path, one that could reveal secrets more quickly, but at a higher risk. The conflict between the two reflected the complexity of the moral and strategic decisions that the narrative had been building. The truth could be obtained safely, slowly, and deliberately, or discovered hastily, risking consequences for everyone involved. Meanwhile, Thomas faced an unexpected physical challenge. A door that slammed shut blocked the main passage, forcing him to improvise and protect Ethan as he made his way through the corridors. The mansion seemed to test not only the protagonist's intelligence, but also the courage and loyalty of everyone around him. Every move was crucial, and the physical tension combined with the emotional, creating a multifaceted climax. The great revelation came when Ethan managed to decipher the last series of codes in the diaries. Isabella had not only disappeared strategically, but had also left instructions to preserve certain secrets and protect specific individuals from historical scandals. The mansion, far from being just a setting, was a carefully planned mechanism designed to challenge and guide those who sought the truth. Ethan understood that each obstacle faced, from shadows and doors that moved on their own to interpersonal conflicts, had been part of a test of perseverance and intelligence. At that moment, Ethan demonstrated his transformation. He was no longer the curious young man who had arrived at the mansion days before. He had become strategic, analytical, and emotionally mature, capable of balancing courage and prudence. His ability to interpret the signs left by Isabella, understand the intentions of Thomas, Margaret, and Elena, and make critical decisions under pressure evidenced the peak of his growth. Each action culminated in the resolution of the central mystery, while the mansion seemed to finally recognize its conquest. The climax reached its peak when Ethan gathered all the main characters in the central hall, sharing discoveries and connecting each subplot to the main narrative. The final revelation not only solved the princess's disappearance, but also clarified the intentions of each character involved, creating a complex and satisfying resolution. Everyone's reactions reflected relief, dissipated tension, and recognition of the effort required to uncover the truth. Finally, the mansion, almost as a conscious character, returned to its initial tranquility. The suspense, which permeated every corridor, shadow, and object, found a coherent conclusion. Ethan had overcome not only external challenges, but also internal ones, consolidating his arc of evolution. Isabella's truth, the mansion's legacy, and the complexity of the characters were revealed in a powerful, unpredictable, and emotionally satisfying way, concluding the most intense point of the narrative. With the truth finally revealed, the exiled princess's mansion seemed to breathe silently, as if acknowledging the conclusion of a journey that had lasted decades. Ethan, now transformed, walked the corridors with a quiet confidence. Every shadow, every winding corridor, and every object out of place carried the weight of discoveries that forever changed his perception of Isabella's story and of the town of Hawthorne itself. Relieved, Thomas Reed relaxed his posture of constant vigilance. The tension he had carried since the beginning of the investigation dissipated, replaced by a deep respect for the protagonist and the princess's legacy. He began to share detailed information about the mansion, revealing small secrets that, while not essential to solving the mystery, added historical and symbolic richness to the narrative. His loyalty transformed into open collaboration, strengthening the bonds built during the investigation. Margaret Hensley, satisfied with the preservation of critical secrets and the responsible disclosure of sensitive information, felt fulfilled. She knew that Isabella's story would be told with integrity, respecting both the memory of the princess and the interests of the surviving families. Her interaction with Ethan reinforced the importance of ethics and prudence, showing that not all truths needed to be revealed abruptly, but rather carefully and strategically. Elena Winters also underwent a transformation. Her initial ambition gave way to an understanding of historical responsibility and the need to balance curiosity with caution. She and Ethan established a partnership based on trust and respect, ready to face future challenges without repeating the mistakes of the past. The narrative showed that the protagonist's growth was directly linked to his ability to build alliances and consider the consequences of his actions, making him more well-rounded and prepared. The mansion, silent and imposing, remained an eternal witness to the past and guardian of the princess's legacy. The corridors, once frightening with shadows and noises, now seemed to convey a sense of harmony, indicating that the tests and enigmas had been overcome. Each obstacle, from the codes in the diaries to the locked doors, contributed to Ethan's development and the resolution of the mystery, showing that the environment played an active role in the narrative, as if rewarding the protagonist's courage and intelligence. For the town of Hawthorne, the impact of the investigation was subtle yet lasting. Isabella's story, now known in its complexity, brought about both admiration and reflection. Preserved documents, published accounts, and the memory of the princess transformed the local historical perception, connecting past and present in a coherent way. Ethan had not only solved the disappearance, but also respected and preserved cultural heritage, demonstrating growth and responsibility. Finally, Ethan briefly reflected on his journey. The curious young man who had arrived at the mansion had evolved into a strategic, emotionally mature, and ethical investigator. Each challenge faced, physical, psychological, and moral, had contributed to his growth, solidifying a narrative of overcoming and learning. The story's conclusion not only resolved the mystery of Isabella, but also highlighted the complexity of human relationships, the importance of historical legacy, and the strength of a protagonist who transformed himself in the face of seemingly insurmountable obstacles. Months after the events, the mansion remained silent, now respected as the guardian of Isabella's secrets. Ethan continued his research, now with Elena by his side, both interpreting ancient stories and unraveling mysteries ethically and strategically. Thomas maintained his vigil, but calmly, and Margaret dedicated herself to preserving essential historical documents. The town of Hawthorne admired the courage and intelligence of those who dared to confront the past. However, some doors of the mansion remained locked, and shadows still seemed to move discreetly through the corridors, reminding them that, even with all the answers, certain secrets of the princess might never be fully revealed. If you were surprised by the secrets of the mansion and Ethan's journey, share this story with friends who love mysteries and adventures. Leave a comment telling us which part of the mystery intrigued you the most, or which secret of the princess you would like to uncover first. Subscribe so you don't miss new stories full of suspense, unexpected revelations, and mind-bending riddles. Every comment, every reaction, and every share helps keep Isabella's memory alive and explore together the mysteries that are still hidden in the shadows of the story.